And we're live.
I'd like to call to order the City Commission work session for January the 10th, 2023. We have the regular agenda items that we normally do, so we're convening the work session, and the first item on the agenda is future agenda items. And we have a report on that of what is on the list.
Yes, thank you. So we began the conversation about parks fees, so we've added that now to the February 7th, which is our next work session. We'd also like to bring the code enforcement complaint process, I believe, was another that was identified to bring forward. And then we would like to try to get through the sanitary sewer lateral program. That's been an ongoing program in cooperation with trying to deal with some of our...
Talking about I&I.
I&I, correct. And then hopefully a brief discussion about downtown public restrooms. That was one of the projects that have been identified for ARPA funding by the commission. So Public Works has been working to identify a location potentially for that facility. And then into March, we're looking at a joint planning commission, city commission meeting. We should have the community survey results back that we do every other year. And then one of the other requests was city setting speed limits with that new authority provided from the state. And then we'll see if we can fit the street design standards in there. We had brought that a couple months back, and there was, I think it was when we were going through the appeals for that Park Place development. So we've pushed that out.
Okay. All right, so the first item is charter park designations, and this is something that we've been working on, and it has come back, and there's a few little odds and ends that we need to give staff some direction on with regard to where we want to go. So they are basically the Ermitinger House property, Dement Park, Sportcraft Landing, McLaughlin Promenade, and the Claremont Way properties under the BPA power lines.
All right, City Commissioners and Mayor, tonight Denise Conrad, the Assistant Parks and Recreation Director, will be providing an update on those 5 properties and discussing the underlying issues that need to be resolved in order to designate them as charter parks.
Before you start, Denise, do we have a good map of the Ermitinger site? Maybe if it's blown up, it's easier, because I couldn't tell quite where the lot lines were. I know they were kind of orangish, so that will be helpful.
Okay.
I'm assuming it's going to be up on the screen, so. Yeah, and you need to move the mic closer.
My voice doesn't carry normally, so I apologize. So of the 5 parks, looking at Sportcraft first, and that one has had a long-standing lease agreement with a third-party operation, and that would be the boat moorage and the houseboats. This property, if designated a charter park, would no longer, or would lose the flexibility of the potential lease operations that we have currently. At this point in time, we're also utilizing the property for ODOT on the bridge project, and then we're still negotiating the lease agreement with the third party for the marina area. And the other thing that is in process is our 6F property exchange with ODOT.
Excuse me, Denise, can you use the clicker? It's...
Sorry about that.
So our charter also states that we cannot sell, lease, or otherwise transfer park property. So this lease agreement negotiation with the third-party operator needs to be completed, or however that finalizes, prior to doing any charter. And then the other piece is that we're finding that there are some utilities on properties that are down through Sportcraft and part of the 6F property exchange. And so those easements would need to also be finalized prior to a charter. I think the Sportcraft one might be the most difficult of the 5. And then if we look at McLaughlin Promenade, that one did not have a legal description that we could utilize in processing through the charter park designations. However, in 2019, Kelly Reed in planning was able to solidify some funding so that we could get that survey done. So that survey was complete, and upon the completion of that survey, we were finding that there were encroachments that include structures, private access to properties, parking, and landscape encroachments. And it's pretty significant through that strip on the promenade. So that would be an area that we would also need to look at being considerate of how we would approach that with the residents. Most of that is all private encroachments. Again, the other item would be the utility easements along that section of property. We have quite a few PGE poles down through there, and so those easements would need to be defined. And then,
Before you move on, I think I noticed in your staff report, that it was not mentioned that the McLaughlin Promenade is now on the National Register of Historic Places, which also wouldn't preclude it from being a charter park, but it basically adds another layer of review, which would also apply to the Ermitinger House as well.
there are multiple layers of reviews based on their location as well for archaeological and some other.
Right.
So this is the map of the property, and you can see it's a long piece of contiguous or linear property. We use that as a walkway, pathway, and then there's benches and some other, I don't want to say memorials, but significant, I'm losing my jargon for that, the monuments on the property. And then Ermitinger House, as we've discussed, is a piece of property that has not just the Ermitinger House, but the parking lot structure and the fire station on 7th Street. That's all contained, not the entire parking lot up to the Hive, but a section of the parking lot between Ermitinger and the fire station are part of the lot. This one seems like it would be an easy one for us to move forward on with a lot line adjustment or just a different description of the property when we charter designate it. And we've done that with some like Clackamet and some of the other ones where we've done a general description instead of a very legal description. And so this one I think would be easily separated by a property line adjustment or a lot line adjustment. There are some requirements from planning for the library parking that impact that parking lot next to Ermitinger and the Hive. The Hive parking would not be affected by this lot line adjustment. It would, or it's not the Hive's parking, it's the city's parking next to the Hive. Just want to clarify that. The part where we would have the library parking signage allowing them to park behind the Ermitinger, that would just go through a minor site plan and design review after the lot line adjustment. So we feel like this one would be something that could probably be an easy maneuver action to get it to a point where it can process as a designated charter park.
Can you outline on or maybe Jacob can do it, where the actual lot is? So when we accepted the house on our property, what was the tax lot? That it's the whole thing, or?
It runs just off of 6th Street. There's a driveway lane.
Right.
So it runs right along that driveway lane, goes all the way across to the fire station parking corner, and then goes right around the fire station building. So all the way out to 7th.
That whole?
Yeah. And then back towards Carnegie and that whole section.
So that whole thing is our tax lot?
Yes.
Basically?
But
And the
I
house
think we can
sits
do
on just
an
a small
easy
part
lot
of it?
line adjustment right in the parking between Ermatinger and the fire station. And we could probably, the lot line adjustment could come back behind their parking, because there is a lease agreement with the fire station that they have the parking adjacent to the building and a front between the Hive building and that one right there. Yes, Jacob, perfect.
Yeah, the IOOF Hall.
Pardon?
The IOOF Hall, the Hive is just the tenant, that's not the name of the building.
So I think that that one, it has an easier path forward.
You just cut out the house, period.
And then
Easier.
the next one is Dement Park. This one, PrAC has previously discussed in several different members of PrAC over the years. I've been here 15, almost 16 years, and this has come up several times throughout those years as a potential to sell and not charter. So that one has stayed kind of off the path forward. It is a 0.4 acre lot. Our minimum standard is 3 acres, and this one also has a steep slopes overlay.
Can you do on this one too? I think I know where the boundary is, but I just wanted to be sure.
Can you see that, Jacob? Yeah. So it goes down, straight down to Jersey there, and then comes back around, wraps past that little, it's like a little
Pathway?
pathway, but it's got a little hut or a bus stop looking shelter there, and then runs up, back up to McKinley and across where.
Okay. Need to get my magic marker.
Perfect. Thank you, Jacob. So this property currently, because it's so small, our maintenance guys go in, they mow, and then they edge and, if need be, spray for noxious weeds. But it's minimal maintenance effort at this point in time. Developing this property on the steep slopes for anything recreational would probably be a little bit of a challenge. But also, once we do that, that means more maintenance for a very small piece of property. And what I wanted to show you also is right in the dead center of those 3 big parcels of park property is Dement. So there's that tiny little almost triangle there, and that is Dement. But it's surrounded by significant park properties.
Oh, okay. Oh, so it actually abuts Charmin as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So I wanted to make sure you saw where it was located in relation to the other parks surrounding it. Claremont Way was purchased a few years ago by a previous director, and this was purchased with the intent of developing a dog park. The concerns or issues moving forward with this is that it does have BPA, Bonneville Power Administration, and PGE easement overlays on the property. And both easements have restriction to what can be allowed on the property or developed within that property in their right-of-ways. And they each have different restrictions. So this property is 3 pieces contiguously. I just showed them separately as tax lots. So the first picture is actually one tax lot with a gap in it, and then there's the third piece. PGE's right-of-way restrictions don't really allow you to do much within the right-of-way, if at all. And that would include putting chip or bark or anything down on the property. I talked with Public Works, and they said that they've had some limited success in gaining opportunities of putting fencing around where they have a pole, a transmission pole. But being that we have a transmission tower and 3 poles from PGE, it might be difficult for us to get that leniency. They do have an opportunity for a review, so we can propose something and have it reviewed. In their restrictions, they do note that community gardens and dog parks are allowed. However, in looking at that, so the BPA, I just wanted to show you quickly that the PGE and BPA are adjacent to each other on the easement. So it's the entire width of the property and into a little bit further outside of what we own. And then the BPA restrictions, nothing within 25 feet of a wood pole, nothing within 50 feet of a metal structure. This BPA easement is currently vacant, so there are no structures on the BPA easement currently. That doesn't mean that they won't put something there or want to have access to their property and then nothing can be in their way. So in looking at those restrictions, I showed some of the dimensional pieces. It's about 46 feet from the transmission leg to the outside of the property and about 46, 48 from the other side of the leg to the outside of the property. So that'll give you kind of a dimensional perspective of where we can or cannot put anything, which is pretty much the entire width surrounding that transmission pole, but there are 3 on the property on the outside by Claremont. So the tower resides in the middle, and then the 3 poles run down Claremont down to Malala. With this, I kind of wanted to see what it looked like because it was intended to be a dog park. If they don't allow fencing, what's the traffic look like? So in 2019, they did a traffic trailer count, and it's an average about 2,500 cars in 2019. So I think we're probably looking at a little bit more traffic now in 2023, and they're saying the average, the traffic counter wasn't in the middle there, so trying to get an average speed is a little difficult, but average speed was 21 to 29, and the highest rated speed was 45. So if you're looking at that property, is the community going to feel like this is a place they want to have an off-leash dog park? Now, it's currently unofficially having that use, but minimally. So I think it's residents within that area because there is some multifamily housing nearby. But this one, I think, would be one that we would need to really consider our options in development. And then if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, or if I don't have the answers, maybe Kendall has.
I heard it drop.
I got it.
Any questions? Any thoughts about any or all of these? We can go, yeah, let's just go one at a time.
One at a time?
Yeah. Let's just start with the last one, Claremont Way. I presume that this was this park purchased with general fund money, or was it specifically like park STCs, or what funding source did we use to purchase this? I remember when it happened vaguely.
I'm pretty sure SDCs were used to purchase that park. SDCs were used to purchase that park.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we purchased the property because it's not technically a park. Any thoughts about this particular property?
So do we know, would we be able to put like porta potties there?
No structures.
Even a temporary structure?
I think if for PGE, we would have to have a discussion with them and propose. We'd have to see what they would entertain as a proposal, but currently they're saying no structures.
I'm sorry, what?
Currently they're saying no structures.
It says building structures of any type, permanent or temporary, that includes but not limited to sheds, playground equipment, basketball courts, restrooms, picnic facilities such as shelters, tables, and barbecues.
So is that PGE or BPA?
That's PGE's right-of-way restrictions.
Okay.
Which when we purchased it, we would have had to sign off and said yes.
But the other half of the width is BPA?
Yes.
It's actually, the BPA is adjacent to us, but not necessarily fully on our property. So we don't have a full width of the BPA right-of-way. They're just
okay.
overlapping onto our property adjacent.
I see.
Adam, any thoughts on this one? Tony, this is where we used, for the storm damage, we did our grinding and whatnot. People brought their yard debris, and we did it on part of that property, didn't we?
That's
we
on the
went off-
public,
I
on the
don't
public
think we
works
ended
end.
up using that.
Yes. They use it for lay down as well.
We've used it, yeah, for some lay down.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
Temporarily.
Frank? Any thoughts, Rocky?
No, this one is the one I have the least input on. I mean, I know we purchased it for a reason, so it'd be nice to be able to use it in some fashion for that reason, but I don't think it's like something that, I mean, even when we purchased it, it was knowing this was going to be
Problem?
a lengthy, or something that wouldn't be right away. I would like to see it become a dog park or gardens or something, but I don't know that among the other things on the list, there's other priorities there, I think, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to, I don't think we want to sell it or anything. I think it
No.
should sit there, and we should look into the possibilities of what we can do with it in the future.
Yeah, I guess I'm not real thrilled about it being designated as a charter park. I don't think it meets the standard. I will say, I'm going to say this for the record, I have environmental concerns about us putting people, dogs, or anything near those power lines. They make me nervous. They buzz, they hum. There are studies, I don't know if I totally believe them or not, but there are problems. And I think us putting anything there that would put people in some kind of danger over the long term bothers me.
And not to mention the traffic.
Yeah, there's the traffic. I think it's great that it's open space, and I was frankly puzzled why PGE would sell it in the first place, but maybe they didn't want to, I mean, because they still have to deal with their own property, but I guess I just have concerns about the power lines itself. We cannot move them, we can't do anything with them, they are there, and as long as it just gets mowed, I think it should be left as open space. And if we have things we need to use it for, like laying down stuff or piling yard debris, or there will be no next storm, knock on wood, I think that that's probably the highest and best use, and I don't like using that term because I don't really believe in that, but this one of all of them makes me really nervous. I know other places in Oregon City that are adjacent, I will say adjacent to the power lines, and you can hear them from inside of people's houses going, they make that low hum, and the crackling and the popping. I just don't think it meets charter park criteria at all. And it's got a lot of restrictions. I don't think I'd want to have anybody be doing a community garden anywhere near that. It's just, I'm glad we have it because it's in public ownership, and that means that nobody's going to try to do something crazy on it in terms of trying to build on it or build adjacent to it or whatever. So I think it could just stay the way it is.
Yeah.
It's like I have some concurrence.
Yeah.
Is that helpful?
Yes. So no charter designation.
Oh,
for that one
definitely
at this
not.
time.
No.
It doesn't even rise to the level of that.
All right, so Dement Park?
Okay,
Which one are we at?
Dement. Yes. Besides, it's named after one of our former mayors.
Well, not only that, but we call it ourselves a park. Anytime we name something a park and we show it on our maps as a park, I would be super opposed to selling it because we've labeled it a park already. So it's going to be a park. And I would say then we need to make it a charter park.
Mike, any thoughts on Dement?
I agree with what Rocky said.
Adam?
I just have concerns over what the public benefit would be for us to keep it in our hands, because I want to make sure that we're, again, using it to its highest use, which may be to do nothing to it at all. I'll tell you, I didn't realize, looking at that map, I can
Have you
see
been to
my
it?
house, and before I saw this, I didn't realize that was a park. So, with Rivercrest right there, and with Singer Creek Park on the other side, I would be open to at least hearing what PrAC has to say about what they would like to see there. But at this moment, I just don't know if it meets the standard, especially due to the size.
Yeah, I think I have previously gone to PrAC and said that I didn't support their getting rid of the property. And so if we do take this back to PrAC, we would need to be specific to them to tell them what, because see, this would make a great community garden.
Yeah.
In my opinion. It'd be a great spot for a community garden. We've got that piece of property off the South End Road that was kind of a remainder from a subdivision, and it's a community garden. And that thing that one is busy, and it's fenced. We wouldn't have to do anything with the part that's the unstable slope. But, I think, I've only walked on the upper portion. Obviously, I wouldn't go down below, but what I haven't done is walk down on the Charman side to look up at it. So that was something I didn't get to do in the last couple of days because the weather was crappy. I think that, we need to, I'd like to take this back to the Rivercrest neighborhood and ask them if they would be interested in seeing this turned into a community garden. I know it doesn't meet our standards, but every park doesn't have to be big. We've got Richard Bloom's Tots Park, and that's a tiny park in the McLaughlin neighborhood, within blocks of, other bigger parks, but it still serves its purpose. And I think that in the long run, since this was one of our city fathers, that we should sign it and let people know who Mr. DeMent was. Now, I know he was a real estate developer and speculator, so we might not want to point out some of that, but he has a little bit of a sordid history, and there is a DeMent Street. So, there is some history with regard to his background and, why we probably named it DeMent Park. But I think it's okay to have little places of green space, even though we've got Rivercrest and, maybe there's some benches there. It's a place for contemplation. Not everybody wants to be at Rivercrest and have all of that activity all the time. I mean, you got to have some places, and I think our park study talked about that we need to provide areas for not only active uses, but passive uses.
So we'll bring this one back for a charter park consideration.
I do have one question. Does designating at a charter park increase our maintenance obligation or maintenance cost in any way?
To make it a charter park, no.
Sorry, I can't hear.
No, not to make it a charter park, but it would make, if we do any development, then that would be
Sure.
a maintenance consideration.
Okay, yeah, I get that. I just wanted to make sure that just designated it didn't obligate us to do something more expensive.
Well, I don't think putting like a community garden in there or some other passive type use would be against the charter park requirements. I mean, we're not talking about, doing a major development with like a bathroom facility on it or something like that.
Right.
So I think, if we want to talk to Rivercrest and talk to PrAC and say, is a community garden a good idea? I know some people would probably say, let's make it a dog park, but maybe the whole thing doesn't have to be a dog park.
But I guess separating out the potential use down the future, I guess I'm hearing we will bring DeMent Park back for consideration as a
Yeah.
charter park.
Yeah. But we can ask the two organizations the question. And maybe other neighborhoods have some idea of that too. Just because it isn't in their neighborhood doesn't mean that, they might not have an interest. All right, Ermitinger. I think the idea of doing a lot line adjustment and separating out the main part of the house and its addition is a really good idea. That way it kind of keeps it clean, and that is, the area we should be looking at. I had forgotten that the parking lot was part of that lot, and I thought,
So we would consider a lot line adjustment that really was more of the non-asphalt part of the lot. Does that make sense? Because we have the one
Yeah.
drive aisle, and then we have the parking stalls. So if we just kind of, for lack of a better term without a map, really kind of the green, the landscaped area around the home as for a lot line adjustment, and then make that portion the charter park.
Yeah, the part where, on the side that says parking for the Ermitinger house, I mean, I would include that. A little bit of that.
Okay.
Or no, not included?
No, well, because the parking is library parking, so it would be right along that back, the back of the house where the sidewalk is.
That's the north property line, yeah. And then bring it along
So it'd be,
from where, what I was thinking is where the tree is and the bush, just include that.
There's a little indention of parking right
Yeah.
adjacent to
'Cause
the
we-
house.
If we
and
do
that
a
would
lot
line
line
up.
straight across from where that white car is, then there's no setback there.
Question. Does the national designation, is that just for the house, or is it for the house and part of the property?
house.
It's for the house and the property that it sits on. It doesn't,
But just the property under the house? The
Well,
reason I'm asking is,
I would have
if
to-
there's
I
if there's
can't answer the
land,
question without looking at the National Register nomination, because it usually says, and this was done really early, this was like in the late 70s, so we'd have to go back and look at the nomination itself to see what was included as part of the property. Because, give you an example, when we did the lot line adjustment for the Ainsworth house, it included everything. Property under the house, all of the grounds around it, and when we did the partition to separate that out, we went back to the nomination and amended the nomination to include the 1.5 acres that the house sits on in the grounds. So that's
I
really,
just asked because
Yeah.
it would seem to make sense to have the footprint match up on those two,
Right.
have the lot match up to the designation.
right. So we have to go back and look at the National Register nomination itself, which is online, to see exactly what was stated. It may say nothing, or it may say everything. So that's going to be the key
Just think
to
it makes sense to have a match.
turning, yeah, they do have to match. And,
Didn't the National Register for this get updated in, I want to say,
maybe the
early
inventory sheet
2000?
did, whether the
Okay,
nomination
okay.
itself got updated
Okay.
through the feds, I doubt that.
okay.
But that's easy to look up, we've got it. I mean, even if you go on our site, I believe the nomination is on there itself.
Yeah.
So that would be, yeah, I mean, I would be in support of that. I can't imagine that we're going to do anything other than to continue to enhance that piece of property. So we have a consensus that we want to go ahead and do the lot line adjustment as recommended, subject to the, whatever the,
The description.
Yeah.
The matching descriptions.
yeah. I'm going to look, see if I can look it up while we're chatting. Ermitinger House, there it is. All right. Anything else on the Francis Ermitinger? I had somebody ask me about this house the other day, and I can't even pronounce it wrong anymore, and it was like, I looked at him and I said, I think you're talking about the Ermitinger house? Yeah, that's it. That's what I got. I said it's Swiss,
It's pronounced a lot of different ways.
Yes, it is.
Over the
Yes,
years.
it is. Yep. All right. Last but not least, our favorite, Sportcraft Landing.
Oh, we skipped.
McLaughlin
sorry.
Promenade.
Oh, sorry, McLaughlin Promenade, my second favorite. Yes. Well, I absolutely adore the McLaughlin Promenade. I am so grateful that we finally did the survey. I think that, yes, we do have a number of encroachments, but we also felt strongly enough about it to put it on the National Register. Whether or not it needs charter park designation is another question, because we also have the VFW hall in the middle of that, and I really think that the protection of it really comes from the fact that the city's designated as a historic landmark. site, and also it's on the National Register, and to me, that affords a great deal of protection. If I was to wave my magic wand, which I don't have right now because it's in the shop, I would like to look into further of the encroachments. Some of them may be easier than others, and where we can minimize the encroachment, I think we should definitely take those out. Where we can't, we should document those and have those filed on the deeds of properties along in there so that it's very, very clear about, where somebody's property is and where somebody's property isn't. I'm not 100% sold on it being a charter park because, again, I feel that the National Register factor and the city's historic landmark designation are pretty strong. Comments?
I think that if any of our parks are charter parks, this is the one that needs to be a charter park. It's our founding father of the city. It is probably, arguably the most important park in the city. I think it needs as much protection as possible. I understand the national status, but I worry that it has been ignored this long, and that at some point it should be fixed, and the encroachment issues and things should be dealt with at some point. I think it's on our radar. We should work on it. We should work towards it, because that problem will never go away unless we deal with it.
Yeah, we've had people try to encroach more into it.
I don't want to lose that park in any way, or have it threatened in any way. I do a lot of work in Seaside, Oregon, for an event that I do, and there's so many parallels between Oregon City's history and so many other cities. But you talk about the promenade at Seaside, and that the original mayor of the city donated that land, and knowing that that view of the ocean should be a public space, and that bluff, McLaughlin knowing that and understanding its history and understanding its importance, I can't think of another place that's more important to have as a charter park. And so I would like to see us, I know it's going to take some time to get through these hoops, but I think we need to do it. I actually think it's the one thing that put this on our, well, it's not the one thing. I think Waterboard Park was the one thing, but this was one of the things that put this on the radar in terms of realizing that, oh my gosh, these are not ever become charter parks, and the city can do what they want with it unless we change it. So I remind you of schemes to build a tram across from the promenade out to the falls, and buying houses, etc. This park needs to be protected.
Yeah, I can go either way. Just in a quick scan, I don't see the property being identified specifically, and I'm looking at the National Register nomination.
On the Hermitaire?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think.
I always go back to that. That's where where.
Most of those seem to be the structure.
Yeah, this one
What
was
we've
done in
historically
77. They've changed, they've upped the standards for the nominations now, but this one is, it really gives a great description of the house. It barely talks about, occupies a site on the Willamette River at water grade at 5th and McLaughlin Street, so that was back when it was there. Then it was moved to here. 11th and Center on the fringe of downtown. And then she moved it, okay, then it says, to rescue from an uncertain future, the house was acquired by the preservationist Ruth McBride Powers and moved to the city-owned property behind the fire hall at 6th and John Adams Street. Privately financed renovation, et cetera, et cetera. That is as much description of the property as given. So we're good.
I guess the larger question for the promenade is that you know, if you've looked at it or you've walked out there, you're well aware, and I think we've talked a little bit about, you know, some of the encroachments
Yeah.
that exist, whether that be in the form of driveways, drive aisles, access to properties, landscaped areas. This will also have, like, for example, VFW parking lot. We're going to have multiple easements along here, like some of the fencing for the rock wall along 99E. So is this we're willing to make it a charter park acknowledging the existing built environment? I mean, there's some things, you know, we could potentially work on, but I think there are some things that are permanent and there.
Yeah.
And I think that's the bigger question we've been struggling with is what do you do? Are we going to acknowledge these? You know,
Does the description go over the cliff?
I'm sorry?
Does the description go over the cliff
The description?
of the promenade? I thought it was at where the
No,
historic
I don't.
fencing is.
Yeah, I'd have to pull the survey.
So you're saying that you're concerned because if we have to do more work, you have to go over
Well, they
the
already
promenade
are.
to get to the cliff?
Yeah, I mean, they've got to access it from the top in order to
Right.
do any work on it. It's anchored up at the top. I mean, there's just a lot going on this property that it's not going to be clean. And I think, like I said, I think the bigger question is,
we can deal with that.
you know, what do we want to do with some of these encroachments? Because in some of them, I don't know that there's anything we
Right.
can do.
I think you have to accept that and honor that and just, and
Document
then
it.
not,
Yeah.
you know, and make it clear that additional encroachments aren't going to happen.
Yeah, I think you basically we have to monument that, not physically, but listed as information regarding, as, you know, refer to this document with an asterisk in the charter park section. And like I said, I think what we have to do eventually is we have to go along and we have to have these things recorded on people's deeds, that this is the city's property, this is where your property is, we will allow you to have this here, but that's, you know, that's it.
So I think what I want to try to avoid is 40 years from now, right? Something's, you know, potentially you're going to someone might need a public access for work that's happened or work that needs to be updated or replaced. And so I think it's just trying to make sure we're clear moving forward as to when we make this a charter park, what does that mean for those
Right.
easements and improvements that are already there, right? I would hope we could avoid a situation where it's like, oh, you got to go to a vote because you want to make improvements to the rock wall protection, right? And maybe we do want that. I just,
Do we
you know,
want to put something in there about routine and ordinary maintenance of historic features such as the rock wall, such as the McLaughlin Promenade path itself, et cetera, et cetera?
I'm not so worried about that. I'm worried about other jurisdictions that have historically utilized that. So whether it's work that has to go in there in any of the easements that exist, or, you know, it's just, there's so many, it's not like it's just one thing.
Right.
Right?
Oh, let's bring it back.
There's landscaped patios, there's landscaped gardens, there's drive aisles, there's parking areas for homes that face the promenade itself. There's a complexity of encroachments there that exist, and if we're going to acknowledge them, that makes it a little bit easier. I mean, there's a way to do that. I guess just trying to get a little bit of direction on what the commission's comfortable with, and trying to be as clear as we can for the future as to what someone has to go through if something needs to be done, some type of an improvement or a change in how we handle that moving forward, you know, because all of a sudden, you know, we're entering into, and I'm making something up right here, we have to expand the lease, we have to expand an area for them to put a new rock wall fencing in. Does that have to go to a vote because it's encroaching further into the
Who's
promenade?
rock wall fencing, a private party or us?
ODOT. So they hang it from the top
Sure.
and down.
Well, that's what I was saying. We can identify those types of things such as, but leave enough room in it to allow us to say, you know, routine and ordinary maintenance of whatever it is. I think I don't think it's our intent to say that just because something has to happen, some maintenance, that has to go to a vote of the people. I don't think that that's appropriate. I don't think that we should be doing that. Because that, to me, it makes no sense whatsoever.
But isn't that what's required? Once it's designated as a
Well,
charter
if you're
park, all
making some
those
sort of
restrictions kick
substantial
in.
improvement. So like when they were doing the digging through under Clackamat Park, that required a vote. Because Clackamat Park is a charter park, but, you know, that's not something that's fairly routine, that you're going to be digging a water line underneath something.
Well, and
Commissioner
when I-
Mitchell, I didn't hear you complete your statement.
What I'm concerned about, are we tying our hands to, for maintenance, let's say on that rock wall, by designating as a charter park?
And if I may,
Because I don't know, the way the charter's worded, can we make an exception for that kind of activity?
And
Because the charter's pretty clear that you can't change the use of a park.
In the description, well, that's
Without
not
a vote.
changing, that's not changing the use.
Well, then why did the work in Clackamat Park have to go through that? Because that's going to go back to its original use after the work is done.
if I may, I might be able to clarify some of that. So my understanding through the research is that if we have an established easement, that they can maintain their utility where it's located. However, in the case of Clackamat, they moved where they were putting the utility. So that is a new piece and would require a vote of the people. However, if we establish these easements prior to chartering, then they would be established easements, and then maintenance is allowable. And where Tony's talking about the potential of them having to move or expand the coverage or anchoring, anything in the space that they have been given as an easement would be fine, but if they're going to expand outside the easement or change locations or change how they're utilizing the space, then that would be a vote of the people. And that's my understanding through the research. We would clarify that with our legal team prior to coming back to you and making sure that it was very clear and everybody's on the same page as what that legal statement would be.
And I guess I think, you know, if we go down this in terms of acknowledging the easements, I'd like to, you know, Wesleyland Park, I think, is an example where, you know, the neighboring property had a 50-foot easement on Wesleyland Park that existed prior to the park, but we still sent it to the vote. And I think there's just, you know, these are oddities that pop up every once in a while, but it's things we've kind of stumbled on through the years.
Place Park.
And then Commissioner Smith mentioned trying to address some of these. I think that's also a discussion that I think would be beneficial. You know, if things can be removed that are encroachments, is it our position that we do want those removed at some point to be determined after further discussion?
Yeah, I think we would take the low-hanging fruit. You know, if somebody's got a flower garden, I mean, I think that's an easy one. But, you know, if it's a structure, I think that's a different story. I just think we need to have those of us that walk that regularly have probably a good idea of what some of those encroachments are. But I think it would behoove us to maybe put together sort of a quick and dirty laundry list of, you know, because I know there's that access road that goes back there to access the houses that's part of the charter park, because I remember where the stakes were when they were surveying. We know that there's some signs in there. We know that, you know, we have a few people that wanted to expand their yard into the, you know, we cut that off and said, no, you can't, that's not your property. So I think just, maybe a windshield survey of it, of what some of the major encroachments are, would be helpful if they're not familiar with it, what those are. I also don't want to tie our hands either, which is why I said I could go either way. If it wasn't on the National Register and it was just a city local landmark, I would be a little more, I'd be a little more concerned. But I think we need to have a handle on kind of what we're talking about in terms of those encroachments. And we didn't really monument that along the way, did we? It was just those stakes. I mean, I know there's some monument points, but
I feel like I have a fair idea in my head, but I'd still like to kind of get a real grasp of what it actually
yeah, I know, I do
entails.
too. I know where the problem areas are, is what I will say, or the encroachment areas are, so. So it sounds like we need more information on that particular one.
Well, I would agree with Commissioner Smith in pursuing the charter park. I also agree with the mayor in that maybe we can establish some conditions precedent by a document that says specific things will be allowed, and that document would exist prior to it becoming a charter park. And that's kind of how I would approach it. I think that, and I also feel like, for example, you're saying about dealing with specific conditions. If there is a structure there and that structure should suffer a devastating loss, what would our position be on replacing it? So those things can happen. Would you not replace any structures that are lost?
It depends on what it is. We've got some historically designated landmarks, which I don't think are in the promenade, but I know one of them is awfully darn close.
Well, I think it's a beautiful piece of property. It's one of our shining diamonds. I'm for protecting in every way. And I feel your approach, Mayor, of establishing a document ahead of time, see if that's a legal approach to this and go from there.
Bill just is going to say yes to everything, so it's all good.
Usually usually from your lawyers, I don't know, or I'm not sure.
He's smiling.
Possibly.
I know, it's the typical answer. It depends.
Depends.
I would support that.
Yeah, okay, so we're going to get more
Me too.
information. All right. Sportcraft. Mike, you want to lead it off?
I guess
Do you
I
have
would
anything?
just kick
Oh,
this
say
one off
anything?
by saying,
Yeah, I don't want to make this a
that
charter.
the existing long-term lease is in complete contradiction to
I do not want to make this a
park.
charter park. I think
So
that,
many people talking, I couldn't hear what you said.
I said if there's one that I struggle with the most, if we have an existing lease, we've
Yeah.
had a long-term lease, if we want to lease it in the future,
Right.
it seems to be in direct conflict with
yes, it does.
the charter.
Yeah, this should not be a charter
Limitations.
park.
Yes, I would agree. It should not be a charter park.
Agree.
Okay, so we have 2 no's, 1 yes, and 1 we're looking into it.
Understood.
And so we will be bringing the dement to the Rivercrest Neighborhood Association.
Well, I guess I wasn't very clear. We kind of have 2 discussions going on around dement. One is, do we want to make it a charter park or not?
Yes, we said yes.
Okay. I think that I guess I'm asking for direction. Can that happen prior to having a discussion about a potential future use of that park?
I think that we can ask the 2 organizations that I mentioned what their thoughts are within the next month, and then we can decide that we should let them know that we think it should be a charter park, and that here are some options for what could happen there. What do you think? Before we say it's going to be officially a charter park. We're saying it's proposed to be a charter park. I don't think it would, having a community garden there would be prohibited under charter park. We wouldn't have to go to a vote. I don't think having it as a passive park, putting some benches in, or even a fence around in it for a dog park, I don't think that would violate the charter. So if we're going to talk about doing something with it, we can have that in our pocket. we can make it a charter park, and we know that these are the things we're going to do to it.
I guess I don't.
Does that sound backwards, or what?
Well, okay, so we go out and we ask the neighborhoods what they like, and we hear 5 different things. Is that a reason to slow down making it a charter park?
No.
I think they're two separate processes. We make it a charter park, and then we figure out what we're going to do with it.
I think those things can happen simultaneously.
Well, after
They
hearing,
could, but I don't think they need to.
Yeah, they don't.
We don't want to, I don't think we want to hold up making it a charter park in order to figure out what we're going to do with it.
No, I don't either. I'm
Okay.
just saying those things could happen. They don't have to happen together, but they could happen independently. They could happen, one happens before the other happens. I don't, it's not a deal breaker.
well, if it is the case that we would be allowed to do some of the things that you just mentioned, I would support that as well. I just wanted to make sure, in my previous comments I made about it, that I wasn't just sitting there doing nothing. And so I would support that, and I'm not opposed to having more parks in my neighborhood, so, yeah.
I support that. Which that, Mike?
Asking the question.
Reaching out to the neighborhood association and also to PrAC
Yeah, you
about.
can even ask CIC.
Right, and then, but moving forward with chartering it.
We'll take their suggestions. We'll figure it out.
That is not what I said.
I'm just saying that. I'm not saying just because we asked them.
So
doesn't
now,
mean-
we're going to, before we bring this back for consideration as a charter park, we're going to reach out to both neighborhoods, the neighborhood association, CIC, and PrAC, to see what they'd like to do with this .4
What do you mean,
acres.
both neighborhoods?
What, wasn't it River, maybe, okay,
It's
maybe it was just
Rivercrest.
Rivercrest, sorry, I thought I heard 2.
It was Rivercrest and the Parks and Recreation
Yes.
Committee.
Yeah.
So the caveat is, we'd like this to be, we are proposing this to be a charter park. We're not asking them that question. We're asking them,
What would you like to see?
what might be options for use of this piece of property? Is it a garden? Is it a park? Is it a passive park? Is it a dog park? It is not pickleball courts. It is not any of those things.
For our parks, normally in those situations, there's a master plan associated with the park where there's some form of public engagement. We can go to these neighborhood associations and have that conversation, but I think we would need to engage with a wider body of
I'm not we're not
people
precluding that.
to-
We're just saying this
to
is just
determine the use.
this is just a question.
Okay,
This is just a question.
okay.
We're not precluding a master plan in the future or anything like that. We're just saying, hey, is that clear as mud now?
It's
I
going
got
to be a
it.
charter park.
Okay. All right. So we have McLaughlin Promenade coming back with more information. We're going to move Dement Park forward and ask a question at the same, simultaneously or after, before, after. Swartcraft Landing was a definitely hard no. Claremont Way, I think we're just leaving it alone.
Understood.
Right? Thank you.
Thank you.
We could buy a lot in our neighborhood and call it Rocky Smith Park. Thank you, Denise. Anybody need a quick stretch break? You're all good?
That's good.
I'd really like a brownie bite, but that's not going to happen. I said I'd like a brownie bite, but I said that's not going to happen. All right, item number 2.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm James Graham, Economic Development Manager. Along with me is Ann Griffin, who is Economic Development Coordinator with the
Good evening.
department. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the Economic Development Strategic Plan and going over some of the accomplishments and next steps that we see for the plan. But however, in the interest of history, I just wanted to go over some historical items or facts. On June 3rd, 2020, the Oregon City Commissioners at that time appointed a steering committee to do this plan. We had actually 2 commissioners serve on that plan, on that committee. We had Commissioner O'Donnell, and we had former Mayor Holliday also serve on that plan, but for a very brief period of time. On November the 4th in 2021, the Oregon City Chamber of Commerce Government Economic Affairs Committee was supportive of the plan when they presented it. Also on December the 6th, 2021, the Citizens Involvement Committee also actually voted in support of the plan. On December 7th, 2021, staff presented the plan to the city commissioners, and they actually asked for more information. On January 25th, 2022, staff presented the plan to the Oregon City Business Alliance and received general support of the strategy. On February 25th, 2022, the chair of the Oregon City Heritage Coordinating Committee was supportive of the plan. And on March 14th, 2022, the Planning Commission voted in support of the plan. And then again on March 16th, 2022, staff provided an update of the Economic Development Strategic Plan to the City Commission, and the City Commission indicated that it wanted to discuss the plan further. In the way of our accomplishments, just go over that for a moment. We always start with the definition of economic development, because it's our firm belief that you have to define what you do. And we see it as economic development is a strategic and collaborative process that creates an environment that systemically supports new investment, creates and/or retains jobs, and broadens the tax base, therefore improving the quality of life of people. Based on this presentation today, we want to look at several categories of this plan, and they range from 1 to 7: business retention and expansion, attraction, entrepreneurial support, urban renewal, tourism, and then we discuss some next steps for the remaining 6 months of the biennium year, and have discussions and questions from that point. In terms of BRE, or as we call it, business retention and expansion, we launched a new business-facing website, OregonCityBusiness.com. I hope you've been able to had an opportunity to take a look at it. We also developed a business guide and outreach to Oregon City manufacturing companies as well. We also are a supporter of the Clackamas Child Care for All initiative that the Clackamas Workforce Partnership has spearheaded. We visited 20 businesses, and they are manufacturers, healthcare, tourism, professional services, and construction and tourism. All of those businesses were a part of those industries. And then we worked during that time with the Community Development Department, our own Community Development Department, and crafting an ombudsman initiative. I think I turn it over to you, Dan.
All righty, well, good evening, everyone. We've talked a little bit about Talent Ready, but just to remind you what that is, Talent Ready Oregon City is a program that supports both our local residents as well as our local employers. And in terms of people who are looking for new economic opportunities that live here in Oregon City, they're able to sign up for Talent Ready Oregon City and receive information about job opportunities, as well as support services, mental health training, job training, and other forms of support. For most of 2022, we were laying the groundwork to launch Talent Ready. This is, as you know, workforce development requires a lot of partners. So the coalitions we've been telling you about, including Clackamas Community College, WorkSource Clackamas, the Clackamas Workforce Partnership, Oregon State University Extension Program, and then also the county, particularly their behavioral health department. So we've given you information about how we've structured Talent Ready. That includes our champions team, our marketing team, our programs team, and our education and training teams. And I'm happy to say that we've gotten full participation from some of the partners that I've listed there. You know, I realize that we don't have the Oregon City School District up there, and they've been very active and involved as well. The second bullet says assistance provided, so I think as we come into 2023, now we're getting busy. We've got all the partners in place, and people have given us their feedback and helped us develop what Talent Ready should look like. The program officially launched the first week of November, so just a couple of months ago. And in the first 2 weeks, we had 11 Oregon City residents sign up. We're also are talking with employers and having them sign up as a way to get additional support as they're looking for new talent. Whenever we meet with companies, whether they're little or big, the first thing they tell us is that one of the concerns they have is getting the right people in the door. So as we get into 2023, we're really getting busy. We're going to be doing marketing and promotion of the Talent Ready program. This is a picture of a billboard that went up last week. This is on 99 as you cross over the bridge. It's in Gladstone. One of the high traffic areas of on 99. So it was the billboard that we were recommended to us because of the high traffic. But in addition to billboards using social media, it's in the Trail News. And our partners, including the Chamber, are also promoting the program. So we are now officially off and running.
Are you sure that's on 99?
It's right up, yeah, when you, I know, I had to go there too. You know where Baskin Robbins is?
Yes.
So it's that billboard there.
Oh, that one, okay.
I think it's at Gloucester Street, I think.
It's Gloucester, yes, right, but yes. Oh. Everybody knows where the Baskin Robbins is.
In terms of what's ahead, in terms of what's ahead, with regard to BRE, we will continue doing our visits to our target industry groups. We continue to talk to businesses regarding childcare. PGE and OMED, which is a manufacturing, nonprofit manufacturing group, we formed partnerships to help us with business attraction. The OMSIPN program, we will be continuing to work with our own community development department in developing processes and actually help to educate the public with regard to our codes and processes, and we want to assist developers with some of their troubleshooting, their projects. With regard to business attraction, everyone really knows that fiber optic technology is the new 21st century infrastructure that every community actually needs. And so we have been working to actually with Mitchellc Manufacturing. Mitchellc advises to develop a feasibility study on our behalf. Did I skip something? Yeah. I'm sorry, I apologize. Let's go back to business attraction. I think I skipped that. We're currently working with 2 technology companies to potentially relocate to Oregon City. One of the companies is out of state, and another one is within the area, within the region. And we're very close to getting them to relocate, and we're very excited about this. But we continue to work with them, and hopefully within the next 90 days, we will hear something from either both of them or one of them. The partnership that I mentioned, we established a business recruitment partnership with PGE, Clackamas County Economic Development. And we helped a company by the name of Communications Network to actually relocate to Oregon City. And that's why we were actually developing the plan that you see here. Now back to fiber optic. Working with Magellan Advisors and our entire, some important members of our citywide team, which includes the city manager's office, the IT, public works, finance, community development, in terms of reviewing and finalizing a draft plan that hopefully you will be seeing very shortly. We conducted interviews with a variety of external agencies. We interviewed county leadership. I think some of you were interviewed or were involved with our surveys. We held interviews with targeted sector businesses to assess their needs and resources, and we received 340 survey responses, a little over 200 online, and 160 hard copies were mailed back. Entrepreneurship.
Alrighty, now this is back to me. We've spoken to you quite a bit about our partnership with Clackamas Federal Credit Union. We had CFCU here, and I think that the Entrepreneurial Opportunity Loan Program is one of the more important programs that we've been able to start to support entrepreneurs in our community. And happy to say that we had 2 loans that have closed now for 2 startups of women-owned businesses here in Oregon City.
New or existing?
They were startup businesses.
So they're new.
Yeah, they're new, right. I think one of them was like a year old, and the other one was like 6 months old. And the other tool that we're getting ready will be a grant program. We've given you, we reported to you first about our application to Business Oregon to support a microenterprise grant program. We're waiting for approval from Business Oregon, but when we do get that approval, we'll be able to provide grants for 10 microenterprise businesses here. You can go ahead and click on. Other thing that also was ahead, we are working to develop a public procurement assessment program. We're looking for opportunities to provide more economic, opportunity to small businesses that will have the chance to work with the city. So we're going to be looking a little more closely at some of the procurement decisions that we make as a community, and look for opportunities to have smaller companies bid on some of those processes, women-owned companies and companies that are owned by people of color, and provide assistance to them to be able to bid on those opportunities. So it's really a fact-finding mission about how Oregon City makes some of its procurement choices, and looking for ways that we can open the doors to additional businesses in our community to participate in those processes. I mentioned the Entrepreneurial Opportunity Loan Program earlier. We did have the round, and with those 2 businesses, we're anticipating having a second round of EOLP later this year. Don't have a date for you yet, but about March, I think, is when we'll make that available. Some of the additional monies that remain, so that folks will have a chance to apply. Again, that's a loan for up to $20,000. One thing that we did learn from this last go-around, that for some of the folks it took quite a bit to get all of their loan materials in place. I think two businesses that we were talking with that didn't quite have their financials up to snuff, frankly, will be coming back to us and resubmitting some of their loan application materials. So that in and of itself is a great way to support some of our local entrepreneurs with that second round.
With regard to urban renewal, I think all of you know the work that has been conducted with urban renewal. We've completed, as you know, community outreach, coordinated it and moderated a Urban Renewal Commission retreat or retreats. We've had some town hall meetings. We worked with the urban renewal to develop a vision statement as well as a framework for decision making. We've crafted the 11th amendment to the urban renewal plan and helped identify priority projects. And now we are working with the urban renewal to draft a ballot measure and voter information. And in the meantime, we've had some preliminary discussions with potential developers of various properties in the urban renewal area. With regard to tourism, the Concierge Institute has now completed its training for nonprofits. And as you know, we've launched Oregon City's brand, which is Oregon's hometown, Welcome Home. And we've implemented a marketing campaign. We promoted existing community events and tourism and tourist-facing businesses all along, including we promoted First City as well as the Arts Festival and some other activities that has happened. And as a consequence, they saw some pretty good visitation to their events. We conducted a market analysis of the community's tourism activities and interests. And so we got some pretty good feedback from the public with regard to our events. Tourism continues with, and we, as I mentioned, our advertising campaign and marketing collateral was developed. We have a relationship with KATU-TV. They have provided us with some ads, and we also produced some lifestyle show spotlights of Oregon City events. We also had a digital and printed travel planner, and I think you have a planner there that we actually did a planner and a visitor guide for the public. And we used the visitors guide. We put the visitors guide in all of the visitor locations around the state. And if we have to go back to reprint the guide, that's a nice, or the travel planner, I should say, that's a nice problem to have, because that means that people are looking at them and using them.
Are we out of it already?
Not yet, but if we do, that's a nice problem to have. We also have a companion piece to this, which is a little pamphlet that you fold out with a map on the back of it with all the locations of our restaurants and other points of interest that we have. Thank you, Jacob. And then we also have a M'Laughlin walking tour map that some restaurateurs have asked to have, and we've given those out. We've done a social media campaign rotating on a monthly basis, and we do this for the entire city, the downtown, midtown, uptown. And so we've done that, and we will continue to do our reels, Instagram reels that lots of people seem to like. And we worked to reestablish the Arts Commission. With regard to tourism continuing, we had a redesign of the Travel Oregon City website, and we increased our visitors to the website by 5 times. Now we have 10,000 visitors to our website. We had them last year, 10,000 visitors to our website. In terms of our stakeholders group, we've conducted some quarterly stakeholder meetings, and we attended the statewide tourism event hosted in Oregon City. It was a statewide tourism event held at the Hive, and we were fortunate to have them here.
When was that, James?
When was that? That was 3 months ago. The Arts Treasure Trove. Staff worked with the Arts Commission to conduct community arts surveys. So we have a survey that has been done, and the Arts Commission will be reviewing that survey. With regard to what's ahead in tourism, the Concierge Institute will start again, and this time we will be working with for-profit businesses to provide training in terms of their customer service and tourism-facing activities. We will also be looking at how to attract more experiences to Oregon City, because people need more than simply somewhere to eat and someplace to look at artifacts. They want experiences, and the river, of course, is a very important asset that we simply cannot overlook. And we want to see at some point, tours, river tours, boats that come to us from Portland and other areas, and we want to prepare ourselves for something like that. We continue to work to streamline event permitting, and we continue the social media support The Concierge Institute, we've just instituted we actually just launched a historic merchandising grant, where each of our historic sites will be getting about $4,000 to buy merchandise that they can sell and keep the profits, because with any business, you know you have to diversify your revenue sources. And so therefore, this is another source for them to build capacity. But all in all, we've done a lot, not only in terms of economic development, but also in tourism. But with regard to tourism, we do understand that there are some inherent challenges in tourism that existed for many years, longer than certainly I have been here. For instance, particularly in our nonprofit sector, where we have some of these inherent challenges. For instance, lack of capacity. Our tourism sites, there are not enough volunteers. And the volunteers, as we all do, get older and have less availability. So that's a challenge. It's to the point where it's difficult to be open on a schedule, a set schedule. And also some of these sites lack ongoing programming, because people want programming, they want entertainment, they want to see history come alive. And so they're looking for ongoing programming, which we don't have that. We have bits and pieces here and there. And unfortunately, we also have, and I'll just be honest, we have adversarial politics that are involved here. And once again, they have been these adversarial politics have existed longer than I have been here, but I certainly have experienced them. So, understanding these inherent challenges, it is our recommendation that there's another way. And the other way is that we support the development and creation of a DMO, and that is separate from the city, and use that funding to, that the tax lodging tax, the transient lodging tax for that operation. And we hope and we support the development of DMO as quickly as possible, so that we can continue this work, and so that the work can be continued in terms of this, in terms of tourism. So with that said, that's the conclusion of our presentation.
We've brought this a couple of times, and I think tourism, childcare, and then the overall budget seem to be the major topics of discussion. Just try to figure out the best way to help walk through. Like, are there areas where, okay, we're good with that, we can move on from, and where are the other areas that we want to focus our energy and time?
I guess I wanted to ask if you're giving a little bit of an update, talk a little bit, maybe just for a few minutes, about the collaboration with the two entities in the community, the Chamber and the Downtown Oregon City Association. And they weren't specifically called out. I mean, obviously I'm reading into it and I'm looking to see where I know that there was intersections. So maybe Ann, you could talk about that a little bit.
Sure, I speak with staff at both DOCA and the Chamber on a regular basis. I think in terms of some of our tourism activities, we do work with DOCA in supporting their events, and DOCA is very helpful too in letting us know about properties that become commercial space that's available. People are asking us frequently about what's available, and in terms of the downtown, DOCA's got all that information and is a good source of resource for us. And in terms of the chamber, they help us spread the word when we were supporting the Entrepreneurial Opportunity Loan Program. They helped us promote that program. And as we've been helping them with they've just finished last week, the Business Recovery Center had some grant programs available, so we also helped promote their programs. So I do feel like we are in close collaboration with both of those organizations.
And of course, our former tourism program specialist was very much in contact with both of these organizations because that was his job, to communicate with our partners. Now, before any of what you see, before Ann and before Daniel Gearing came on board, it was just me, and I was doing a lot of the interaction with the chamber as well as DOCA. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you. Go ahead. Don't need to turn the green light on.
Matt was also here.
Matthew.
It wasn't just you by yourself.
Yeah, well, Matthew, yes, he was here too. Yeah.
So, I think we need to separate tourism. I have a couple questions, but actually, I think the surprise tonight was the question that I was going to kind of ask about, and that's the DMO topic, a destination marketing organization, which prior to Oregon City having any tourism staff, the tourism strategy and plan was basically created by tourism stakeholders and Downtown Association. And the assumption was at some point we would move forward in terms of tourism and in a plan for tourism, whether that lived under the city or not. And so having it under the city was kind of a placeholder to see what conversations would come, because essentially the idea was that the city would orchestrate the stakeholders group that would eventually be the key deciders in whether or not this became under the umbrella of the city or whether it became a DMO separate from the city, and that hasn't happened yet. And I think it's a good dialogue to have. I've already been hearing this dialogue in the community in the last couple months about the possibility of rethinking tourism in Oregon City in terms of where it's housed. And so I'm really interested in that conversation about the destination marketing organization, how that might look, because I'm not sure how you're proposing it. Regardless, there's other thoughts on this, and the concern to me in the past couple of years is that we have held that transient room tax money that normally in the past had gone to all of these heritage groups through grants, had gone to all the summer programs through grants, and we have not been doing that. So that was under the old system of civic improvement trust and all of that, which is why at the beginning of last summer, when we had no plan to fund summer events, I said, well, we should maybe resort back to this old school citizen improvement trust so we could support our summer events. That didn't happen. We also did not, yes, tourism promoted our summer events, but we did not spend one penny that was promised to Downtown Association for their first city festival or for any of the other summer events. And so that money still sits there after a whole summer of events that we promised we would support those big events, and which is why in the last goals session where we really started talking about the importance of community events, and is why that $100,000 placeholder is there for community-sponsored events, which we haven't spent a dime of, and we missed that summer. we haven't spent it because we have no mechanism to spend it, which was our grant process that we had before. And the plan was to replace that with the Concierge Institute, which was very successful in terms of programming and the amount of information it gave to the people that participated in it. But the people that were really gung-ho about participating in it in the beginning kind of lost their, well, not everyone attended all the meetings, and people tried to keep up with it, but it was piecemeal to some part towards the end. It was a great idea, but most of the entities that participated in the Concierge Institute were doing so because the end of that process was supposed to result in some sort of grants and some sort of funding. And that process to some degree has happened with entities getting funding, but it wasn't through any sort of grant process, and it wasn't in any real transparent way. And so that core group of stakeholders essentially didn't have a dialogue in how that money was being utilized. So there's a lot of things that I think worked. There's a lot of things that didn't work. And I just don't want us again, it's what, we're the first of the year. We're gonna be getting to another summer very shortly. And I don't want to go through another summer without having this plan for going into the summer. We missed the chance last summer. So I really want to consider that, but I also don't want to move forward in terms of tourism until we go through our goals process, our budget process. I think there's other stakeholders in the community that have some say, or would like to have some say in what tourism looks like. And so I don't know if we have a plan to open up the position that is available at this point, or if we're going to hold that. I hope we hold that to figure out what the structure is. But I guess I would ask you if, do you have a thought, since you mentioned the DMO as a possibility, how that would be, how that would come about, and whether that would be housed under the city or not?
Yes, I've given a great deal of thought of it. And it really, the DMO should be separate from the city, outside of the city, and use the transient tax for its resource base. And so that all the groups that are involved can have what they have been asking for, and so that the process can go forward. And I also recommend that we do this as quickly as possible, and not talk it to death, but to actually move on it, and establish it, and see it established so that it can do its work as soon as possible.
Would that be through, and I agree, but I do want to have a dialogue with, you know, some of the other stakeholders. Is that something we could do through some sort of a work session, have some conversations about that, or?
Well, I think that the best way to approach that is to make sure that all those who really want to see that happen are involved in the process.
Yeah.
And that the group choose someone or some entity to help marshal that through. I don't expect it to be the city.
Okay.
I expect it to be separate and keep that type of integrity there.
Does the county have a DMO?
I'm sorry.
The county has, well, they cut a lot of it. I know that they do have tourism, but I don't know to what degree is left of it.
Mount Hood Territory is that group, but I didn't know if it was a separate destination.
They're building back.
Yeah.
I know that they
Yeah.
had screwed. Okay, I will kind of end, I only have just a couple of questions in terms of tourism, because I think that derailed in a good way, derailed a lot of my questions. But I think we do need to have a conversation. I agree with that. Okay, my one question is, the encumbrances for the Concierge Institute that's listed there, 76,000, what is that?
Oh, yes. That actually is, we actually, that $76,000 encompasses three things. $24,000 for the merchant grant program that I had mentioned earlier in my presentation, that would, $4,000 that would go to each of our historic sites so they can buy merchandise. The next one is a...
Okay, $24,000 was what?
$24,000 a grant. It's a total. It's a total of $24,000, and it would be divided up. $4,000 would go to each of our six.
Okay, that's for the merchandising thing.
Yeah, that's merchandising. And then the other one is a, we were looking at hiring on a contractual basis, a volunteer coordinator, because our historic sites need more volunteers. And so therefore, we were setting aside $40,000 so that the volunteer, so that that coordinator could be hired under a contract to help the tourists, to help the historic sites identify and recruit volunteers. And the last one is for part-time interns, because a lot of interns now want to be paid. And so that's what all of that represents. It's the total.
Interns for the facilities.
Yes, interns for the facilities.
But but the volunteer coordinator is not in place?
No.
And will that stay on hold until we figure out the DMO situation? Or
Yes, that's the idea.
Okay, and the interns,
That'll be held also up until,
so that's all the encumbered, which means that's just sitting there still?
it's just sitting there. We haven't committed to spend it. It's simply, it's a holding place.
Okay, then I'm not sure why it's in that category, but okay. When we do the intern process, the questions I have on that process would be similar to any process I would have with grants. The merchandising grant, it's split equally between all the groups, and that's fine, but how do we determine a way to deal with interns for various museums or various attractions? And is that, I would assume, even though this hasn't been a recent dialogue, but that was mainly, if there's inconsistencies or inequities, I guess, in that, it's mainly to keep the sites open at consistent hours.
That's right.
Okay, but what I struggle with that, and because I get that, and I think we all agree that that's been a thing to do, and I would also assume that if most of these entities got together and knew that they would support that, but they don't necessarily know that, or to what degree it's happening. So but the other thing that I think we need to think about in this is, and this is what, ties to some of the MOUs and the other issues that we're asking. We are in some ways funneling tourism money to staffing to certain organizations when we're asking volunteers to also pay the city for their volunteer work when they do work for the Ermitinger House or Friends of the Park. So I think we have to be very careful on the message that we send to the citizens. If we have the End of the Oregon Trail Museum run by a management organization that doesn't pay us a cent of rent, and we subsidize their staffing, and then we don't do that to our own volunteers for our own buildings. I think that's something we need to think about. So all these things are intertwined. I think we're making some headway, and I do think this discussion of the DMO is smart. I guess those three breakouts that you listed for Concierge Institute doesn't seem to fit under Concierge Concierge Institute at all, because the Concierge Institute idea in concept originally was all these museums and heritage organizations would go through that system, and then they would have funding available to them, which it kind of does fit under that,
Yeah,
I guess.
it does.
But it also fits, what separates then the attraction and expansion, that's new attractions?
That's new attractions, right. That's
Okay.
new. Now, we've talked with each of the historic sites about interns. And so,
Yes, no, I know that.
and so we were offering to provide the number of interns they felt they needed. Each one of them. It's not a competitive thing.
We made our
So they tell us what they need, and we will help them with that. Now, unfortunately, some of the historic sites told us that they didn't even have the capacity to
Right.
accept interns.
Okay, I'll leave that
So-
alone right now, but for the $100,000 that's still sitting there for community events, are we paying back those community events from the events that they did this summer that we promised them funding for? Or are we just saying, oh, sorry, we told you one thing and now you guys are they've clearly already paid for their events, but they didn't know that going into the summer that they were going to do that. And so I question that. And then, are we going to have that mechanism ready for summer? And I would hope we do, because we missed the ball last summer.
But going back to the DMO,
Yeah.
it's as I said, it's very important to move that forward as quickly as possible.
I agree.
And that it be outside of the city, and that you use this, the lodging tax for that, and to identify an entity that will be involved in bringing those individuals together. It should, and I do stress it needs to be outside the city. So our contribution will only be the tax.
Well, it's my understanding that there are regional DMOs throughout the state of Oregon. So our Mount Hood territory is our region's DMO for the state. So there's one, for the valley, there's one for our area, there's one for the coast, so I think there's 6 maybe throughout the state that are organizations. Now, this regional DMO with Mount Hood territory happens to be under the county, but it operates as the destination marketing organization for our region in Clackamas County, and takes in Mount Hood territory and the farm loop and all of that. So we'd be talking about creating one that's just Oregon City-centric.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, gentlemen, do you have comment? You want to make some comments? Is that what you've heard so far?
Yeah, I do. Just some random thoughts. The Concierge Institute needs a new name. I never really could figure out what it meant to begin with, and now, as Commissioner Smith pointed out, it's covering a lot more than an institute to train people. So I'd just suggest that there's some sort of a different name for that.
What? Because concierge, I mean, think about
I understand what a concierge is, but I don't think interns, it isn't really related to what a concierge does.
Well, it's
I would just give it a different name.
Service.
That was just a suggestion.
okay. Service.
Okay.
It's a service thing.
Just a suggestion. I like the idea of a DMO. I think some of the most successful tourism organizations in Oregon, and Bend is one that jumps to my mind, is a DMO that I think was initially started by the city, but now is a separate operation.
It is.
I'm concerned, and Commissioner Smith pointed it out, I don't see that we have enough time for this coming summer to get a DMO ramped up and then have that group figure out how we support local events. So I think we're going to have to consider how we support this summer local events, still under the city's auspices, while we're trying to get a DMO off the ground. I just don't see us
I would concur.
being able to
I
keep
would
all
concur
those
with
balls
that.
in the air.
I would concur with that.
So are we question for, are we holding off on advertising the tourism coordinator position then?
Yes.
Because okay,
Yes. I think that...
until we figure out where this DMO discussion may go.
Exactly, till we figure that out. But in the meantime, it has always been, I thought, to continue as much as possible operations in the interim in terms of providing resources in marketing and promotion.
And that's what I'm concerned about, how you're going to be able to do that. You're not you can't split you into 20 pieces and her into 20 pieces, and your plates are already full.
We'll have to figure it out, even if it means bringing somebody on temporarily under contract to do that. But I think that, but I think we just need to decide what interim services mean. And if it means promotion and advertising, we can do that. If it means running programs and really heavy lifting types of activities, that we'll have to figure that out. That you're absolutely right. Our plate is full already.
Well, I think that's kind of, you're going to do the heavy lifting. And
Yeah.
I think we need somebody that's going to do that promotion and stuff that you could easily hire, not easily, but that's a more, you can bite off that piece of it. Because I think what has been accomplished so far with the tourism and the marketing and this event showing up, that event showing up, this thing showing up, has been remarkable. I have gotten lots of positive comments about it. I think that that's something we need to continue, and we should not have a gap. So if you would consider moving that part of it forward to get somebody on board, even if it's temporary, whatever that is, 6 months or whatever, while you figure out the other part, you need to drop somebody into that now. I mean, the time to think about hiring that person, even on a temporary basis, is not June. It is now. I know the organizations that I'm affiliated with are doing their planning and wrapping that up, so they're going to be, ramping up. I already know about 3 events that are occurring in February, and that's just around the corner.
Exactly, and we will, as staff will figure this out. But we definitely do need to do something interim to keep the ball rolling.
So I know, so I think it's sooner than later.
Yeah, it is.
At least what we're thinking, at least.
Yeah.
We don't want the momentum to go by the wayside.
I just have one more comment, and then I'll stop. Without
You don't have to.
pointing fingers, assigning blame, anything else, I think that the relationship between the Downtown Oregon City Association and the Chamber of Commerce and our economic development staff, we need to all be rowing in the same boat, and I'm not sure we are. And I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I think it could be strengthened, and I think the staff has made strides to go there. As we all know, communication is a two-way street, and I serve as the liaison from here to there, and I have been very supportive of our activities and our staff, and I've asked our staff to look at how they can work within the current confines, because, and I have quoted you on many occasions, I have said your name and quoted you. It's always great to look at the next new shiny thing. It's another thing to keep your shoulder to the grindstone and churn out the things that you do well and keep those going. And I mean, we've been meeting with the Main Street program folks, and we have been doing, DOCA board has been doing some things very, very well. But I think that, to give you an example, they tried this thing this fall with the Harvest Festival. It was way more popular than they thought it was going to be. And that was really good. It brought a whole different group of people to our community that hadn't been there, and we had the table there with those wonderful blue brochures, which, by the way, I need a few more of those. I had 2 requests this morning in one of my classes. Where is that? How come I can't? And I brought some to that group. They took them all. They're gone. So I'll swing by and get some. So I think that's something that we are critically aware of, and I think you have, at this point, you have board support for the activities that we've been doing and the city's been doing, so, you can take that and kind of run with that?
Yeah, this is on a different topic.
Oh, right.
Okay. So, yeah, I was also concerned about what we're doing in the interim, but that's already been addressed. So the other thing that I was wondering about is when you were talking about the encumbrances, you were talking about is it a volunteer coordinator position? What is it called?
Volunteer coordinator.
And that is not currently a filled position, correct?
Correct.
Is that a full FTE?
The part-time. It's on contract.
Okay, it would be, okay, yeah, it would be a contracted. Because that gets me thinking to the conversations that I've had with the city manager about the Youth Advisory Commission and staffing that with, which was proposed with a half FTE. I think Community Engagement Coordinator is the working title now, and I know they're working with Patrick to get that out, but I'm wondering if that could somehow be combined, because Tony has expressed to me that he thinks that it would be better if the new position that was created by the establishment of the Youth Advisory Commission would better be served as a full-time position, and so I'm wondering if since it's not something that exists right now, I think could benefit us if we were to combine the two and make it into a full FTE heading into the next budget cycle. So that's just a suggestion, so that it's all under one umbrella, and that we can have someone dedicated solely to all of the volunteers and community engagement and civic involvement activities in the city.
I think that when we also have to be careful of asking a private contractor in terms of asking them to do too much for the little amount that they're getting. So you very well may get some pushback from people who actually thought to do this, and now you add one more thing because people are concerned about the little amount of time, a little amount of money that there's there to help to pay them.
Well, I'm not saying to add to the proposed contractor position. I'm saying that instead, we would take that and make it a full-time with the half-time position that is currently in the works, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, so the commission may recall, we requested a 1/2 FTE for a community engagement specialist coordinator that would focus on the Youth Advisory Committee, potentially helping with CIC Neighborhood Association engagement, and then a component of that would be potentially, each department has volunteers to some extent. Is there a way to put more resources towards the volunteer opportunities in our community? And that's what Commissioner Marl is talking about is, could that be a full-time position rather than a half-time position? We're in the process of writing the job description, getting that completed. But that is something I think we would look forward to talking about as part of the budget process coming forward. And I also do want to, I think one thing that James was talking about here, right now, we do use some of that transient room tax. So, as part of going to a DMO would be that tourism position would not exist anymore, right? So I just want to make sure we say that out loud and everybody realizes that is part of this equation to make this work.
Yeah, and what I'm saying, thank you for giving that background, is the possibility of instead having the contracted position, combining that with what is already proposed, and instead having a single person as the point contact on those activities.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Well, my entire life, I've worked for what's called outcome-based organizations. And with an outcome-based organization, you either get a good outcome or you get an excuse, and they're not in the business of excuses. So when James first came on, I was enthusiastic, and I still am. And the promise I made to him was get him sufficient funding to accomplish the task, and I think we have. And so, when I look at what we discuss, my comments have always been the same throughout the discussion. If I break down economic development and its subset tourism, in tourism, my concern has been that we don't have the product ready to deliver, yet we advertise for it. And I've always been afraid that when people show up and you don't deliver what you promised, it's a hard recovery to make. So I recognize the challenges he's going through. You know, he's somewhat herding cats. He's got different organizations there he does not directly control. When I think about what is our product offering, well, it's historical, and we need proper staffing, and we need people there to do that. I'd like to see, as I said before, commonality, common hours of operation, even common ticketing. And I don't think we've been able to accomplish that. Even when you talk about dining, I mean, you're dealing with one of the problems all businesses are having today, which is staffing. And when you talk about volunteerism, you know, and now it's paid volunteerism, I had an interesting discussion with our library director, Greg, about volunteers oftentimes use that as a resume builder only to move on immediately thereafter. So you're going to have to compensate them and try to retain them. But putting together a cohesive program, a product offering that we can offer that's delivered on a set schedule and in uniformity across the board, where, you know, I don't want people coming and you can't go here because that house is closed, or you can't go here. You know, that's been something I've commented on from the very beginning. The economic development piece, I'm not talking about that. That's in business building. I've never been fond of what appears to me to be the focus on micro businesses, small businesses. And, you know, I know James have said, well, we don't have the land masses, but I think not every campus needs 200 acres, you know. Are there not 20-acre and 30-acre parcels around here that we could be promoting? And my hope is that the members of your group are out there searching for those and talking to those owners and trying to match up people who are looking for that, you know, with the offering. I mean, I always struggle, you know, we know our best employer is our largest employer is Benchmade. You know, if it was up to me, I'd have the county move out of the old Michaels of Oregon building and give them that to, if I could encourage them to do that, I would do that. And that would give them a beautiful campus which that building was formerly a manufacturing building. So I just, you know, your task is difficult. You know, I want to bring commercial river traffic here. I know you've looked into it, and I've looked into it, and we've got things to overcome. But the clock is ticking, and we're coming into another season. We don't have our product ready to go to market. And I don't want to go, you know, I don't want to go again without being ready to have that product ready for market. I liked your choice of words, encumbrances, or a claim against an asset that we own and they don't. So it's an allocation, really, that's spoken for. Okay. So what I want in the end is success in those two arenas, both tourism and economic development. I know we have wonderful river assets, and those should be easier to manage because those are usually private party owned, oftentimes sole proprietorship. So if you want a fishing trip or a guided trip down to Clackamas, that seems like something that we should be able to put together. And
we're going to have to wait till after they get done with the bridge, as you know, because we have no docks anywhere for them to get to. But this is the time for planning.
No, the bridge.
That's what I think you're saying. It's the time for planning right now.
The bridge is not a showstopper. The bridge will never stop a kayak.
Well, I think the river access by the bridge is a stopper. You can't get there.
Well, we can disagree.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure I could do it even today. So.
And one comment to Commissioner and Commissioners, as we stated in the strategic plan, we did a SWOT analysis, as you know, in the strategic plan, and one of the weaknesses is that we don't have a lot of large parcels of land, and you have to, when the marketplace says I need 50,000 I need 100 acres. Or I need an existing building that's 50,000 square feet. And the market has asked for that. And unfortunately, we can't provide that because we do not have a 50,000 square feet foot building ready to go, and that's what they're looking for. The other thing is, I'm always concerned, and you're not the only community, but there are lots of communities all over this country that have too few people owning most of the land. And you have that here. And you lose control of your city when you have this situation. And that's a fact. You don't control their land. You can't tell them what to do. They'll do what they wish. But we do have few people who own a lot of land. And it's important that the city look at buying property, because then you have more control over your future. But as this commission sits here today, you don't have control over your city with regard to property.
And you've said that from day one, but I'm saying that the job of economic development is to bring parties together.
Exactly, but also the job of economic development is to convince commissioners to spend the money to buy the land.
Well, you may not have to. If you can bring parties together without buying the land yourself, which you see people doing that all the time with options to buy, I think those are things we have to do. So I look at the whole process, you know, I just saw where two major businesses moved out of downtown Portland, out of a tower down there. Do you think if we had a mixed-use commercial buildings between 80 and 120,000 square feet, we would have had a shot at that?
Mm-hmm.
And quite honestly, the commissions that are going to set this vision better tell people what it is we want so we can go out and get an RFP. I mean, I was looking at your presentation where you're talking to people. How can you talk about something when you don't know what you're allowed to offer? So we need to strengthen our own position, and that strengthen your position. So it's a pretty neutral observation, and we all have a hand in the matter, and we could all do better at getting it done. But I strongly feel about get your product ready for market, then advertise it, not vice versa. And I've been a little concerned about that approach.
Well, urban renewal represents a very great opportunity, because that's where your land is. And so therefore, and that's where your greatest economic development tool as of to date is urban renewal.
But urban renewal is not the exclusive avenue where we can succeed. We can succeed at city-owned property. If somebody comes in and does not want urban renewal money, even in an urban renewal area, that's something we should entertain. And I was against this where Mr. Conkle's been directed to not bring us any proposals until such time as we have this vision. Well, let's get the vision.
We have it. We adopted it.
Give me the specifics of what we want and where, so these gentlemen can go out and get an RFP.
That's the next step we have to
No, so
take.
we don't have it.
Well, we have the broad vision, but we don't have a vision for each individual parcel. We were going to talk about that, say, this is the kind of thing we are interested in for the Stimson property. You've already articulated several things that you thought would be good, and I think that's perfect. That's what we should be saying. Hey, out there in the universe, we want this. You know, I don't want somebody to come to us and say, hey, I've got a great project for 12th and Main, and I don't want to use the specific business because I don't want to denigrate them, but we had a proposal. That was not appropriate. We should have been upfront with them and said, 12th and Main, this is what we want. We don't want a retail use with a store on the bottom, and that's
Well, these conversations entertain me, but in the end, if you're trying to sell something, you better tell somebody what it
That's right, and I
is
just
you
had that
want.
discussion with Commissioner Mitchell about, yes, we need to do that at the next urban renewal meeting.
I'm
I
all
mean,
for it.
I will have to respectfully disagree with you about small businesses. I spent my career promoting, supporting, getting more small businesses, because in Oregon, small businesses make up about 95% of all businesses in this state. And the small businesses in turn do most of the hiring. So you have your small business, that is like the pebble in the pond. It keeps rippling out and out and out. Small businesses is the base of many of our communities, particularly businesses that have been here a while. I mean, there's an organization that we're represented on. They've been doing a profile of the businesses in our community that have been here 100 years or more. And there are a lot of them. It's amazing.
I don't disagree with their contribution to the economy. What I'm saying is don't forego the other component.
No, he's not doing that.
Well, yes, he is, because he
No.
doesn't have the land
Well,
mass
we
to
don't,
offer.
we don't necessarily want to say we have 50 acres. I mean, I've played that game at PDC. It's a game to them. You know, they will take from Peter to get Paul, whereas we can spend our wheels on a medium-sized, a small business who's interested in being in our community and staying in our community. I'm not saying we have to forego one or the other. We need to take all of the paths. We need to take all of those paths to get there. So you use our company that you're talking about, I agree.
I'll say this kindly. When people refer to PDC or Portland anything, I start drifting off.
That's okay. I'm just telling you that is, you know, it's, I'm looking up a stat right now. 99.4% of all businesses in Oregon are small.
I know, but our emphasis also is on family living wage jobs.
Yes,
And those are difficult to attain.
yes, they are.
In the service industries and the restaurant industries and some of the smaller industries where benefits are problematical.
Yes, I
Whereas
agree.
a major employer has the ability to do that, including ones I've dealt with that offered in-house daycare.
Yes,
So
there are some of those.
Those are why I say
Yeah.
never give up the search for all.
Oh, no, you and
Everything.
I aren't disagreeing.
Okay.
We're basically saying the same thing. So, I mean, I would like to say that I think that based on what you have shown, you have come back to us on several occasions showing the progress that's been made. I think that has been, that's been great. I will say that I took part in the broadband survey. I thought it was important to participate and talk about that from that standpoint. I'm looking forward to reviewing the feasibility study that's coming. It doesn't sound like it's an exciting topic, but for somebody who just spent 3.5 days without service, and I have broadband, it was a blessing and a curse. If I could have just gone onto the city site, I would have been fine, but I had to deal with my personal stuff. So it was nice to have a break from all of that for a few days, unintentionally. It wasn't my fault. But we have moved the needle forward in terms of what has been accomplished through the economic development strategy. And I think you need to take the draft off of it. I think,
Not until it's approved.
well, I don't know if we need to go, you know, sanctify it or bless it, but I think you have a consensus from some of us that you are moving forward. I'm not, did I hear you say all? I didn't say all. I said you have a consensus from some of us that we feel that you have done most of what you've tried to accomplish. There's still things in the works, and economic development, as I know, being in it for my career, is a moving target. I'm glad that we're not in that stage where we're chasing after the Intels of the world, because you can't do those. We're not going to have a Nike campus in our community. We're not going to have Adidas campus. But we're going to deal with the things that we can do well. I mean, I'm you know, very interested in knowing, you know, we had the land, I guess. The land was available, and so we have a new headquarters going up in our community. What I worry about is that knowing some of the other buildings that they have abandoned around the retro region, how long are they going to stay there, you know? In 5 years, is one of those folks going to say, oh, we got another opportunity we're going to build? I mean, I'm at least glad that the one in Milwaukee, the city hall is moving into it, so it's going to be a reused building, and their building is going to be reused for something as well. So I think we have equal opportunities. I think I have, you know, from this side of the dais, I think we have some support, and again, we can't really approve anything at this meeting, but I think we're past the time of you know, of not approving it. It's been updated. The only question I still have is, what are we doing with I mean, I know this isn't a conflict, but as a city person, what are we doing with $120,000 that's sitting here? When is that supposed to go to DOCA, and what is it that's supposed to go to them for that money? I'm looking at page 119, programs. So what's the program?
$120,000?
It's $120,000 budgeted amount, expenditure to date.
That's already been given to them. That's the $60,000 per year that they get on July 1
Okay, all right.
2 year.
Okay,
as
perfect.
part of the,
Okay, that's what I thought it was,
MOU.
but it wasn't super clear. I thought that's what it was, but, okay.
So can I ask a couple clarifying questions? I think first, the original intent with the economic development strategy was to have it approved by the commission.
No.
would the commission like us to bring this for consideration for approval? Or,
Sorry,
I don't, or, I don't know, I guess I'm like, what would you like us to do next with this plan?
I want to get the draft off of it. Speak.
I'm not a dog.
You are not?
Okay.
Just go ahead, just jump in. We're in a work session, it's informal.
I would prefer that we go through the goal setting before we formally approve anything. I would prefer that the Economic Development Department continue on with their work as they have been, and that given that this is a new commission, I was not a part of the goal setting that year since I came in mid-year, and obviously Commissioner Mitchell hasn't either. So I think that we should go through the goal setting, that economic development should continue as they have been, and then after that, we can have a more robust conversation about what we want to formally adopt as a commission. So that's what I would propose.
Mr. Mitchell?
I agree with that.
O'Donnell?
I'm fine with it. I'm pretty neutral about it, so whatever you want to do is good by me.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, draft should stay on there till it's approved. And I think we need to rediscuss it at our goal sessions and budget.
Okay, so at this point, we'll leave it as is, continue the work we're doing,
Yes.
but we won't, there's no expectation to bring this back until we have a discussion at goal setting and through the budget process. As for tourism, so we're not going to advertise for the position that's currently vacant, which means a reduction in service that we're available to do. So I think what I heard was look into the process for creating a destination marketing organization and continue to support marketing and advertising of events.
We need to hire somebody temporarily, regardless of where that position goes, because we cannot not go without that work. And they don't have the bandwidth to do it, in my opinion.
Okay, so we'll work on the staffing component of it, so there could be an expenditure, probably, and we'll discuss what's the best way to do that, whether that's a contract or a temporary position, but understood. So just so we're clear, that's I think what I heard as it relates to the tourism.
Yes.
There may be some incidental things that are happening that we'll continue to work on, but in terms of, then I think the third part of that was trying to come up with what the process is going to be for the upcoming summer events and making sure that there's a process to get that money out the door. And so I think that's something we can work on, whether it's going back to the old way where grants come in, the commissions, I mean, we'll figure that out. But to me, those seemed like the three priorities tourism related.
Well, and so I'd like a better idea of, what that, if we hire someone to fill in that gap, how that, more how that looks, but also, am I right in that our new communications director is taking over some of the Oregon City travel stuff, or is that not true?
I didn't hear that.
Go ahead. I'm not our new communications manager.
Yes.
I think he's been helping out and I think we've been working through the communication.
In terms of social media and stuff for tourism?
Right. Well, I think with Daniel being gone,
Right.
We hadn't had this conversation yet on what to do.
I mean, if that's part of it, I'd like to see how that too. And but if he's staying in that realm of just city communications, then it would beg more. It would mean we would need definitely someone to fill that gap.
Right, because I mean, I don't think.
He said no.
Well, I'm not sure of that because.
Did you just say no, that's
well,
not what that position is doing?
I don't think the intention of that position was to do that because we had the other position in tourism that was doing it. When Daniel left, when that position, we had to do something.
Right.
And we hadn't had this conversation
Right.
tonight about potentially
Right.
backfilling, at least to focus on the marketing and the advertising component that we lost when that position became vacant. So it was kind of a stopgap until we decide what we
Right.
do moving forward.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So is there an expectation for something to come back, or does that answer your question?
That answers my question. I just knew there was a gap there, and that I know that he was filling in some of that. And
Right.
so I just.
Like he went to the tours.
If that's going to be separated, then it very much is something we need to address, someone to deal with that piece of it.
Right.
Unless that piece continues, if that makes sense. That's all.
It does, yeah, and like I said, I think the original intent was that it wasn't, they were two separate
Right.
activities.
No, I know that. I get that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, let's take a 5-minute break.
Oh,
Thank you.
Because you guys are done, right?
Yes.
Okay. worried that they might be encroaching into that. So I've got to go over there and peek over that barricade. All right, we're calling the meeting back to session after a short recess, and yes, I do have my brownie bite right now in case anybody is interested. All right, so we are on to city manager's report.
Thank you. I think after the last meeting, we had talked about the budget review process. We had laid out a couple dates, and so we heard some recommendations about how long lengthening the process or more. And so Matt and I went back and looked at the calendar, and we weren't sure if the discussion was around having more meetings or more time in between meetings or more time to process. But what we did was, the dates that we have are that we anticipate the budget, proposed budget to be distributed to the Oregon City Budget Committee right around April 5th. We had then planned for the first budget meeting April 20th, so about 2 weeks. But really then, I guess the question is, we were going to meet on, the 20th, the 24th, the 27th. So I wasn't sure if that was the concern.
You're talking about Thursdays?
Yeah. When we start laying out everyone's committee obligations, the calendar gets really small as to the available dates when everyone's available.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm saying this in terms of really we have until mid-May to get through that budget process with the budget committee. So I feel like we have flexibility there, but I'm saying that not fully understanding what the intent of the discussion was concerning the budget process.
But what I heard Commissioner O'Donnell say was that he thought we needed more time so that we didn't end up against the wall on the middle of June.
I wanted to front load another week. I wasn't interested in compressing more meetings into the same amount of time. Wanted to be the ability to look at it, digest it, come up with your preliminary questions, resolve those, and work our way forward. So I was in favor of adding a week on the front end.
I agree.
Whatever others want to do.
Starting the process earlier?
Yes.
When you, so we would distribute the budget on April 5th, but then bump up a week instead of the 20th, like meet on the 13th? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, instead of your back up one week and start there.
Back up.
Come forward 1 week.
Okay, so instead of the 20th, let's just say the 13th of April.
Yeah, so you're going to now have 3 weeks, which allows people to do their preliminary review, their preliminary questions, give them time to mull it over, and then they can come in and then start the process.
Okay.
And if others disagree, I'm not cast in stone on that, but whatever people
So you're
think,
saying we'd have about a week?
we'd have an extra week.
No, you're saying from
So
the time
this
we
is
get
when
it on the
comes
5th and
out
we have the
5th,
first
and
meeting
then
on the
his
13th,
first
that's a
meeting
week,
is
that's less than a week.
20th. So more meetings before that or more meetings?
No, not on the tail. Well, you get the budget on the 5th
Yeah.
for review.
Yep.
This would be our first meeting.
And you're saying if you're talking about adding a week, that would have us starting to review it on the 13th.
Well, what's the pleasure of the commission? I don't care. I just think that 2 weeks with a like Tuesday, Thursday meeting is too compressed and too hard to make qualitative decisions. But I'll yield to whatever everybody wants to do.
What do you think, Rocky?
I'm good with more. Sorry.
I'm sorry, if I could. So we give you the document. You have 2 weeks to mull it over. What we could do.
Currently.
Correct. And then originally we were going to start on April 20th.
Yeah.
And then we had the 24th, but it sounds like that might be too quick. But we also had the 27th. So that would be the 20th. We'd have 7 days, come back on the 27th. And then 7 days from then would be May 4th, which is a day we've identified as available. Does that make more sense to kind of do a week in between meetings?
I would like that.
I would too.
Okay, then I'll
you think?
concur with that.
Yeah, well,
Time to,
I don't have a problem with how Commissioner O'Donnell proposed it either, because I once had to do it in 72 hours with turnaround.
That's the speed reading method. Put it under your pillow.
But I like what the city manager has proposed.
So we'll kind of stick with, our April 5th date is kind of set.
And that's fine, that's when the
Okay.
document's released for review.
Okay. And then, so we'll shoot for trying to get about a week in between our budget committee meetings when we set this calendar. Like, looking at it, I think we're good, because we've already identified the 20th, the 27th, May 4th. So those would be Thursday night meetings, but it worked in terms of when we started overlaying all the committees and assignments that everybody has. So unless there's something we don't know about, but right now it looks like those dates work. So that would kind of be the intent. And then when we get to that third meeting, if we need a fourth, we'll have that discussion about, where does this fit in the calendar? Does that
Works for me.
seem reasonable?
I like that.
Then where would we, I should not point at you, Tony, but where would we put in the budget 101? Throwing that off to Mr. Zook.
We're shooting for February 23rd for those who'd like to participate in that Budget 101.
Okay, we'll just record it so I can watch it later. I will be not here.
Oh, you're on
I will just be
you're
getting
on your
home.
trip, yes.
I will just be getting home. I'm not sure how much budget will be sinking into my brain, but I will give it a whirl.
Okay,
So the 23rd, okay, sounds good.
okay.
All right,
That's the only communication I have for tonight.
okay. I'm gonna put you second to the last, Commissioner O'Donnell.
Well, I don't have anything at this point.
Well, I know, but you're still going to be on the list, so why don't I just take you first then? So Commissioner O'Donnell is not listed on here, but he's going to keep South Fork Water Board, and we haven't met, so he may not have anything to report.
yeah, don't have anything.
All right.
correct.
Let's move on, and I think something we should consider for next year's maybe switching up some of the committees that people have been on forever and a day, maybe, give somebody a break. Commissioner Smith, let's go
I
with
have
you.
nothing to report. We haven't met on, Clackamas Heritage Partners hasn't met recently, Stakeholders Group hasn't met recently, and South Fork.
All right. So B and C are are intertwined. So you will be meeting soon, but not yet, Commissioner Marl?
For what?
CIC.
Yeah, well, I just want to say for the CIC that, and I've said this when we talked about parks fees, that's part of the reason why I had requested that we had that conversation is because, again, I want to insist that we make sure we include neighborhood associations when we talk about who we want to charge for these reservations of city facilities. I want to commend staff for working with the school district and other partners to find meeting spaces, because that's been the biggest concern, is finding meeting spaces as these neighborhood associations transfer out of doing solely remote meetings. And so the city staff, I know, has worked diligently to help identify those, but in the end, we need to make sure that we have spaces available that are city-owned, that we can provide for neighborhood associations. C4, the main thing that we talked about, it was actually the day after last week's meeting when we as the city commission had our letter drafted for the regional mobility pricing project. We did the exact same thing the next day at C4. We had a C4 RMPP letter that was approved. And the same things that I expected from our city letter, I made sure were also in those in the C4 letter. And then lastly,
Has that been finalized?
Yes.
Would you make sure that commission members get a copy of that as well?
Sure. And then the last one with the tolling diversion subcommittee, we had our regular venue is an hour during lunch on the third Wednesday, I think, of the month. And so we as a committee decided that we wanted to have the opportunity to have a lengthier meeting where, not at lunchtime, where sometimes I feel like I'm going to throw up while I'm eating my food, listening about the tolling stuff. And a lot of people just can't make that time work anyway because of work. So we had a 2-hour meeting going over the proposed ODOT mitigation strategies for the identified intersections that would be impacted both in 2027 and 2045. I wrote these down, but I'm going to read from the packet instead. So just a few, I think it would be beneficial if I went through these. I'm sorry for the long report. But so they are reporting a southbound on-ramp, or on the southbound on-ramp, they are proposing a ramp meter transit bypass lane. That doesn't address necessarily the lack of transit in the first place, but they're hoping to make it easier if TriMet is able to increase that what they're providing for our community. They are proposing to convert 15th Street into a one-way.
Our 15th Street?
Yep. Yes.
Can they do that? He's smiling. He goes, I don't know. Yeah. I don't think so.
For the one that I'm most concerned about is the intersection of 7th and Main, the Arch Bridge and Main Street. And what they have proposed is a sidewalk widening.
What?
So, so they're proposing a sidewalk widening on 99E southbound between 10th and Main. And then various safety improvements that are, I would assume, are pedestrian-oriented. Intersection improvements on Oregon 99E and I-205 northbound ramps. They want to add a second left turn lane to the off-ramp. They want to add a second southbound left turn lane to the on-ramp. They want to add a second northbound right turn lane to the on-ramp and widen the on-ramp to 2 receiving lanes, which taper down to 1. On 99 and 14th, they want to add a second southbound left turn lane to 14th Street. They want to prohibit, I'm assuming that's westbound left turns, and begin a third northbound lane on 99E. So they've got a lot of proposals. It's important to note that none of these would be coming out of the city's pocket, which is good news. However, the concerns that I put forward was that they're safety improvements, but they're not necessarily improving the issue, which is going to be that there are more cars on the streets. Because, I mean, where would you expand them anyway? And they've just relied on the whole transit argument that we're going to be helping transit so that less people will be on the road. But that still leaves open the issue that TriMet is lacking in those opportunities. So,
And they don't have enough staff either.
right. So, that's what I have for that.
Well, here's what I'd say to that. If those are mitigation measures that they're going to try to impact in 2027, measure those intersections now, implement those measures now, and see if they have a positive effect, because they are spitting into the wind measures.
Well, and for the 7th and Main intersection, in their projections, that is only an impacted intersection in 2027. They're saying that in 2045, it will not be a problem. So
I'll talk about that a little more in a minute.
yeah.
Well, people have a hard enough time making the right-hand turn onto the bridge as it is, and I have a small car. So adding something to that seems a little ridiculous in terms of turning radii.
So yeah, that's my update for tolling.
I would say if they really want to do something, they would close the driveway closest to the intersection at 14th and Main for the gas station, where I see numerous rear-ender accidents happening there all the time. It is,
One more thing, I will remind you all that the numbers that they're basing on for their studies are traffic counts from, I believe, 2015. Yes, so I would also remind you guys of that fact.
Sounds pretty bogus.
My turn?
I'm looking at you.
Okay. So the C4 Metro Subcommittee heard that same ODOT presentation, and just to tag on to what Adam said about 7th and Main, their theory is that by 2045, I-205 will be so good that people will go back to I-205 and not be using 7th and Main. That's why they say there's an impact in 2027, but not in 2045. So just some comments that they made that I thought were pretty interesting. First off, when Mayor McGriff appointed me to this, I said it sounded very compelling, and it was every bit as compelling as I thought it would be, which was a pretty low bar. They said,
I didn't say it
very
was
plainly,
compelling.
they said that their mitigation work is centered on I-205. They really only care about moving traffic on 205. And that was made pretty clear. As far as 7th and Main, Commissioner Marl laid out the mitigation that they're suggesting, and the analogy that I mentioned to them was, you're talking about an hourglass, and they're talking about widening the top of the hourglass in West Lynn, widening the bottom at 14th and 15th, but you can't move any more sand through if the middle part is just as narrow, and that's 7th and Main. And they have no answer for 7th and Main. They said it, and these are quotes, very close to quotes, it's still being looked at. The ultimate solution has not been arrived at yet, and that they would be running additional simulations of downtown. But they also said, they didn't use the word impossible, but they also said that without property acquisition, there probably is no solution. And the City of Oregon City has rightfully said that we're not interested in giving up buildings in our historic downtown for more pavement. So they are aware of that. But the mitigation efforts that they're talking about are not going to help us. That's my report.
I find it quite ludicrous that, so the conundrum that I have with this is that on one hand, they want to keep talking about 99E, and within the city limits, I refer to that as McLaughlin Boulevard, because it then becomes, it's got a landscape median down the center, even though the speed is still higher than I think it should be personally. It is not the 99E as after you leave Kenema. It's not the same type of road, and they're not approaching it from that standpoint of the fact that it's McLaughlin Boulevard from the bridge to the bridge. I mean, from the bridge to the railroad trestle and then into Kenema. So they're still thinking of it as superhighway type situation, which it is, we're trying to not make it that way by adding these improvements, the pedestrian things that we're working on with them, and the landscaping, and trying to get people to slow down. And they seem to be wanting to just speed it right up, which is weird. Okay, so Clackamas Water Environmental Services, we have a meeting this Thursday. We will be talking about upcoming programming for the year. We have a proposal coming forward that will be an involvement with Solve. They are a partner with Solve, and they want the committee members to participate in doing those sorts of things. I believe there's a discussion coming up about I&I, and then they're going to be going into looking at their budget as well. But that's the first meeting we've had since the holiday. Downtown Association, we just had a meeting today. It was our annual meeting. We had a state of the downtown, and if there's one thing I could point out is that I'm sorry to say that at the end of December, the funding expired for the staff person that we had for Clean and Safe, and we may have to go back to an interim proposal with Rivers of Life, but it is disconcerting to me that when we put out the word to let people know that it was going to be ending, we got very little response. So there's, on one hand, they want it, but on the other hand, they're not telling us that they want it. So it's going to end. And I appreciate your email, Mr. Lewis, about the street sweeping. Let's see, Impact met in the middle of December, and basically the discussion centered around the property exchange that they want to do with Tigard, and I believe we've had some discussions about that. And if you saw the Oregon City News, there was a no way Jose from the county. We're still in play on our piece. I don't really tend to agree with the county on this particular issue, but that's okay. We don't have to agree with them. They can go on their own path with regard to that. So our next meeting is, I believe it's in a week. Let me see here. It's either the 18th or the 25th. Yeah, our next meeting is the 25th. Vice Chair, see if I get his names right, Vern Dixon Jones is going to be taking over as chair. Vince Jones Dixon, yeah, sorry, I knew you'd know what it was. Vince Jones Dixon is going to be taking over as chair. Joe Buck will be stepping down, so they rotate this between the counties. He's from Multnomah. I believe the vice chair position will be going to someone in Clackamas County. South Fork Water Board, as you know, we will be meeting. They're setting up what's happening right now is that the CEO and the staff are working on setting up a meeting room for in-person meetings. And so if we're having a meeting, which I assume was supposed to be on the 25th also, maybe it's the 26th, would be...
on the 25th.
5th, yeah, 25th, which will be interesting. So I'll probably get out from one and go to the other. So we might be meeting in person. Notice has not gone out yet. Willamette Falls Landings and Heritage Area. We have our meeting next Monday on the 16th, but we had a meeting through December. We're about ready to go into a retreat. Two of the big issues that are going to be discussed are one that we've been wrestling with ourselves in terms of how to bring more people to the table. There were 3 nominations that were received in November, and the nominating committee that was headed by Alice Norris before she left for Boise basically did not recommend approving any of the people that were proposed. However, 2 of them are on the board now, and they're trying to figure out how to involve the other tribes. I'm sure there's going to be a very lively and heated discussion, and I say heated because I think it will be. The other thing that they're doing is that the group has finished an internal review with their diversity, equity, and inclusion, made changes to the website, added language involving the organization's desire to add to the lexicon of stories that they're trying to promote. They're in the process of hiring an intern that will do some research on the influence of Chinese Americans in the heritage area, and that will be noted and documented. The issue with the City Hall becoming the new center has hit a big road bump, and I say a big bump because it has to do with the property owner and the tenant of the parking that's behind the old City Hall. So that's being wrestled with, unfortunately or fortunately. And then, as you're aware, there'll be, and I believe you have to RSVP for an event on the 21st at the Westland Library celebrating the Locks. 150th, their birthday actually was January 1st, 1873. And I appreciate staff putting something in our information online about that particular legacy and the Locks and its position in the community. The other thing that's coming up, as you know, is on the 26th, we will be hosting the other cities of Clackamas County, and I presume have we been getting any RSVPs yet? Do you have any idea how many are coming to date? Okay, good, excellent. So we're looking forward to that. I've been bragging all about how fantastic our presentation is going to be, highlighting our Public Works Department, Operations Center. Yes, I am talking about you. I said, I'm highlighting to my colleagues about the information we're going to be imparting to them about our fantastic operations center on First Street. We'll also, if you noticed in the pictures, highlighting the bridge and the other things that are having birthdays in the last 2 months, which includes us. So we didn't do anything. Maybe we should have some extra cupcakes or a cake or something celebrating our birthday, because, and I mentioned to one of my colleagues in Portland, and I said, I really resent you guys thinking that we're your suburb. I said, excuse me, you are our suburb. We were here before you were, and Portland is a suburb of Oregon City. So that's all the news that's fit to print. Any good of the order? Other than, is everybody coming to the Clackamas Cities meeting? Yep, okay. He's laughing. So I'm presuming we'll have a full contingent there of whoever we need to be there from our staff.
John and I will be there.
Well, that's all we need then, right?
That's all we need.
Well, since we're going to be talking about the public safety building, I think somebody from the police department needs to show up. I'm not saying who, but somebody that's not here at the moment. I mean, that's... Huh? You'll give them a memo? Well, tell them it's be there or be square. All right. Thank you very much. We're going to call the meeting adjourned, and we have a meeting following, and we will adjourn to that meeting. Thank you.